when when we became a full-fledged bureau. Basically, our highways, they had been with our highways division previously. We do a number of different kinds of stormwater management restoration work, including stormwater pond retrofits. This is a conventional stormwater pond at the Kent County's Heritage Office Complex that we turned into a stormwater wetland, and now is growing up, basically feeds Broad Creek, tributary to the South River, and drains the county office complex. This is a retrofit we did in the This is a retrofit that we did in the Mill Race community over off Veterans Highway. It was a dry detention pond, basically a flood control facility that was turned into a stormwater wetland a couple of years ago. We were able to elevate part of this area to create a recreational facility for the community, as well as create this stormwater wetland. Sorry about that. There we go. Thanks. This is a outfall area. So traditionally, stormwater management in the county prior to the 1980s basically consisted of collecting and conveying stormwater through communities or through developed areas, and then discharging it into our natural systems, oftentimes our stream systems or wooded areas. This is Towser's Branch, a tributary to the Little Patuxent River in the Crofton area. And it's amazing the amount of damage that can be done as a result of that stormwater being focused and channelized. And this is a site that we restored. The next slide, you'll see it, hopefully see it pop up over my shoulder here in a few. There you go. Is the restoration of that site. So we created a series of step pools in this community, basically slows the water down, allows it to soak into the ground. In this area, the soils are very sandy and gravelly, so actually draws down very quickly. And there's not even a perennial stream system that remains in this area, but went back in and restored that landscape. The next slide, which again should be up here shortly, is this is Cat Branch. This is over by Broadneck High School. This is an area between the Walnut Ridge community and Commander's Way. I can't remember what the community is there. Admiral's Walk, yeah. And so the stream valley essentially between those two communities was badly eroded. There was this sewer line was exposed in that area. We were able to go in and work with our utilities. So sort of the conventional approach to dealing with something like this from our utilities folks would be go in, dump rock over the pipe and do a sort of temporary solution that would hold up for a few years, hopefully. But we were able to work with them in advance, do some planning, go in and create a comprehensive restoration project that runs from about 2,000 feet above Cape St. Clair Road, which will come up here shortly, all the way basically nearly to Cape St. Clair Road, where there's actually some beaver activity now. Slide came up, okay, yeah. So it's a beautiful wetland area. Again, you've got these two fairly dense townhouse communities on either side, and we get lots of favorable views from the folks who live in the communities. An opportunity for sort of a natural area, lots of kids playing down there, catching frogs and all sorts of stuff, but it's turned into a really nice wetland complex. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the development of development associated stormwater management. So we've really gone through several eras over the course of the past 40 years or so in terms of stormwater management. So like I say, prior to the 1980s, basically stormwater management consisted of just collecting and conveying stormwater down into our natural areas. During the 1980s, there were what were called flood control devices that were installed, dry ponds, basically areas that were intended to shave the peak off of storm flows so that there wasn't flooding that was caused downstream, but really provided very little in the way of water quality improvement. And so you'll see, particularly in parts of the county that were developed in this era, like parts of Crofton, parts of areas in Millersville, where these larger dry facilities still exist, and oftentimes they were both recreational areas as well as stormwater management. And so that causes conflicts every now and again. The community of Chartridge has a big facility that floods as it's intended to when we get big storm events, but they also have a pool that's located there and some ball fields, and you can imagine the conflicts that causes. The second era, really post 2000 or so, was the stormwater regulations aimed at water quality improvement. So you see a lot of communities develop with what are called wet ponds, so sort of the conventional stormwater management pond that most people probably think about when they think about these issues. The idea there is that wet pool provides an opportunity for sediment to fall out of the stormwater, for there to be nutrient processing and other pollution processing in those facilities. And so oftentimes in a big community, you might have several of these facilities, or in a smaller community, you might have one large one. And so again, this was that probably 2000 to maybe 2013, 2014 era of stormwater management. Subsequently, in about 2012, 2013, MDE put in place environmental site design regulations, which were really aimed at capturing water as close as possible to where it fell on a site. So on the edges of parking lots, in individual lots. And the implementation of that has been sort of hit or miss in some cases. But there are opportunities. This is a community out by Fort Meade called Watershed, where I think they did a fairly nice job of integrating from a landscape perspective, stormwater management and capture throughout the site, and basically integrating it into the overall aesthetics of the community. And so that's where a lot of the new development, in fact, that's where all of the new development should be in terms of these environmental site design, small practices integrated throughout a site. A couple of things I wanted to mention in addition. We run a Chesapeake Bay restoration grant program through the Chesapeake Bay Trust. They actually administer about $1 million of our funds each year, and those dollars go to community nonprofit organizations who are undertaking restoration work throughout the county. We work with community associations, watershed groups. We work with religious groups, even some businesses who've been interested in pursuing projects. And so this is just a subset of some of the projects that we've funded as part of our FY20 cycle. Some projects locally that have been funded through that program include the Berrywood Stream Restoration Project in Smyrna Park. Bo was involved in a project, a living shoreline project in Cape St. Clair that received some funding through this program. So it's been a very popular program and one that we really enjoy working with the community to execute. So if that's something that folks are interested in, or they've got communities that are interested in pursuing, you can reach out to us. We've got a grant manager, Sally Albright, who runs that program and who's involved in helping to steward those projects. Just a couple other things. We do have an annual report that is available. I think it was circulated by Michael in advance of this meeting, or Eric in advance of this meeting. And we produce an annual report basically to show where the funding for our program comes from, where it goes. We are funded through the county's watershed protection and restoration fee, its stormwater fee. And so this is an annual accounting essentially of that activity that's going on. One of the things that Michael wanted me to also mention is that in the general development plan, and sort of as some of the watershed improvement plan focus of the county, is the conversion of septic systems throughout the county. We've got about 40,000 septic systems, many of which are included in this region in terms of the waterfront areas of the Severn and Magathie. And so the county's working on a couple of fronts to try to facilitate that. The health department has grant money available for upgrades for septic systems to denitrifying septic systems, so they provide some additional pollution reduction benefit. And the county is also trying to work to reduce some of the barriers to broad scale community adoption of septic sewer conversions, if there's interest in that. And if your community is interested, please reach out, and our utilities folks can they're available to give presentations to communities on sort of the ins and outs of what that might take as well. So that's the end of my presentation. Oh, the one thing I did want to show you was just in case you're interested, is that we've got a, on our website, a second to come up here, which is aarivers.org. We have a restoration project map that has locations of all the work that we've done, all the work that we've got in the pipeline. This is probably not going to cooperate, or it's going to be slow. There you go. So I don't know if you can really see it very well, but each of these dots that are on this map, this is the Magothy River right here, indicate either a project that has been completed or a project that's currently in design, including some of the NGO projects that we're doing. And so that's an interactive tool that's available to the public to see the work that's going on as well, which, like I said, you can find at our website, which is aarivers.org. So that's the end of my presentation, but I'll be around for questions. Jeff's up next.
Thank you, Eric. I will be passing the mic.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Good evening. My name is Noelle Chow. I'm the Director of Education and Equity Initiatives for the Watershed Stewards Academy, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Hello, I'm Jeff Fox, Director of Restoration.
And I am Terrell Carter. I'm the community engagement specialist.
Really, really excited that Michael gave us the opportunity for tonight.
Class 4, 4 years born.
Yeah.
John's piece.
John, it's wonderful to see other stewards and other people who participate in WWC. So as you can see, our goal and what we envision is that every community in Anne Arundel is actively engaged to ensure a healthy environment for all. And who we are? So WSA was born of a partnership between County Public Schools and the Department of Public Works. And to give you an idea of how this happened, back in the first decade of this century, there are some people who noticed something. They noticed that when it comes to stormwater, when it comes to protecting the environment, people want to do the right thing. They don't always know what to do the right thing. And county government, unfortunately, doesn't have the capacity or infrastructure to leverage all of this goodwill. And so that's where WSA comes in, because we are an environmental nonprofit housed within Anne Arundel County Public Schools and funded by county money to a certain extent to help connect communities to the resources that they need to make the right choices on behalf of the environment. And so our signature program, which we've had since the very, very beginning in 2009, is our certification course for Master Watershed Stewards. And this is a course where any resident of the county can join and learn how to become an environmental leader on behalf of their community. And I always think of it as you get the best Rolodex ever of contacts because you know the exact phone number of the person in county to call if you have an issue in your community.
All right, and our next program is our Stormwater Success Program. And this program is basically a guided program for HOA leaders, community leaders, and realtors to teach them how to not only inspect, but also maintain their BMPs, their Stormwater Best Management Practices in their community, so they can be prepared for the 3-year annual inspection by Anne Arundel County.
And one of our main restoration programs is our Replant Anne Arundel program. And this was founded around 2020, 2019, because Anne Arundel County has lost over 2,500 acres of forested land between 2013 and 2017. And this is the highest rate of canopy loss in all of the counties throughout Maryland. So we were commissioned through Anne Arundel County, got contracted there to pretty much plant trees as a pilot program, and that's Replant Anne Arundel. And we do that through 3 ways. So coming up next in our year of programs, we have Groves of Gratitude. And what that is, it's small trees, native trees and native tree bundles that Anne Arundel County residents can get. There's a small donation fee attached with that. And then part of the proceeds go to a nonprofit that we partner with. So last fall, we partnered with the Maryland Food Bank. So they got some of the proceeds that we raised from that. And then we also have our backyard buffer program, which just finished up in the spring. So that's partnering with DNR. So more shrub tree bundles that county residents can get and they can plant throughout the county and their properties. And then lastly, we have our tree trooper program, which is the main program under Replant. So that's training community members to know about trees, how to maintain them, how to get them in the ground, and mobilizing residents to plant trees in their communities. So that's just a little bit about us. And then a QR code if anyone wants to learn more about us through our website.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Kelly. Yeah, just for
It's pretty loud, but so see some familiar faces. So this will be a review or a repeat for some of you, but I'm Kelly Krenitz with the Office of Planning and Zoning, and I'm the planning administrator in charge of the critical area team. So critical area law all began in 1984 with the General Assembly. We eventually adopted our bill in 1988, the first one. We've redone it a couple times. We're due for another rewrite in the next few years. Probably once we get through that election, we'll start working on that. We wanted to wait a little bit so that we can incorporate some of the outcome of these type of meetings and the Plan 2040 and those types of things, so that all can be included in our rewrite. Just real quick, critical area has 3 designations. IDA is orange on these maps. IDA are your communities. Revere Beach is my favorite example. Small lots, a lot of development. LDA, Cape St. Clair is of course my favorite example of that one. Those are yellow, a little bit bigger lots. Density is 3.99. I don't know how you get to a 3.99, but that's okay. It's less than 4 per acre. And then your green is RCA. So those are limited. If you're going through a new development process, if you're going through a new subdivision, 1 unit per 20 acres doesn't mean that every lot in the RCA is 20 acres. Some of the older ones might be less than that, but generally it's supposed to be a density of 1 per 20. It's your farms, your open spaces, your forests, those types of uses. There is a very specific use list associated with RCA that tries to limit the uses allowed in the RCA to conservation, education, and those types of uses. Development in the LDA and the RCA, you have a lot coverage limitation. It will be somewhere between 15% and 31%, depending on size of lot, when lots were created. All of the HPAs are protected under the LDA and the RCA guidelines, and forest clearing is limited and must be replaced when it's removed. IDA, which again was the orange, there's no lot coverage limitation in terms of critical area regulations. So the only lot coverage limitation would be based on zoning requirements. All HBAs again are protected, and the stormwater management requirement for that is that they have to reduce the pollutant loadings by 10%. Habitat protection areas. It's a 100-foot buffer. They include the 100-foot buffer and an expanded buffer, but the 100-foot buffer can expand to include steep slopes, wetlands, hydric soils, highly erodible soils, rare, threatened, and endangered species habitats, anadromous fish spawning areas, non-tidal wetlands, FIDS habitat, which is forest interior dwelling bird species, historic waterfowl staging areas, and colonial water bird nesting areas are all included in areas that are protected by critical area regulations. Buffer modification area. So everywhere in the critical area, there is at least a 100-foot buffer. State law allowed local jurisdictions to go in and create a buffer exempt or buffer modified program. Ours used to be called buffer exempt, but people were under the impression they were exempt from everything, so we changed it to modified. But basically those are areas that do not have a functioning buffer. Again, Riviera Beach is a good example. The lots are only 100 foot deep, which means houses are within that 100 foot buffer. They have armored shorelines or they have bulkheads. So there's not a vegetated or open area where you can have or create a buffer. So rather than sending these people for a variance every time they want to do anything, you create a different set of rules. Very general rules for ours are that you can go out to the sides and you can go back, but you can't go closer to the water. Variances Modifications. A variance, there's two different processes. You apply for a variance. A variance includes anything in Article 18 and critical area and the bog overlay. So a variance process goes before a hearing officer. It's a public hearing. Those are the ones you see those big white and red signs for. That's when you're asking to do exactly what it says, vary the law for some reason. There's criteria that you have to meet. I will say that we're looking at those a lot more stringently. We've had some successes recently. It's a tough balance because there is a land use right and there's an environmental right, but we're getting a little bit stronger in our comments and a little bit stronger in the decisions. So modification is the same concept. You're asking to modify something that's contained in Article 17. The things that can't be modified are the requirement for a community meeting, anything that has to do with an APF, which is adequacy of public facilities. You can't modify critical area or bog regulations. Modification is an application that comes into the Office of OPZ, is reviewed by multiple agencies, and the planning and zoning officer makes that decision. It's not a public, there's a public meeting, but there's not a public hearing. And shoreline protection is another area that we're making a lot of changes in. So everywhere you look, you see a lot of rock, you see a lot of bulkheads, you see wood, concrete. We're being very successful recently in pushing back a little bit, working very closely with MDE, working with Eric's group, and really encouraging people to do shoreline, planted shorelines, a softer approach, different uses rather than armoring that shoreline. And that is in response to just sound engineering practices, as well as sea level rise, changes in storms. We've had some difficulties convincing people that they're just as effective, but the storm back in October, where people actually had boulders moved in their front yards, but the vegetated approaches lasted, provided a really good opportunity for us to point to neighboring properties and say, you know, look, it really does work. So that's what we're working on right now, really pushing for the sea level rise. When we do our rewrite, we're going to look at some of the planting practices, making sure the plant material that we're planting can accommodate, you know, more water, saltier water, those kinds of things. So we'll be making some improvements in that area as well.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Anne, if you want to start the Q&A session.
SAC members first. We'd like also to hear from people on Zoom and people in this room. Hey, Paul Spadaro did get me. Okay. Who has a question about what we've heard so far? Holly?
Hey, this is Holly Slack. Eric, I remember you coming to Greater Toronto Park Council a few years ago. I really appreciate seeing you again. And when you did that there, you had said that the infrastructure was really too much for the land, that it was just too dense, that we were kind of on solid land. I was wondering if you still feel that way, if you remember saying that, if you still feel that way. Do you?
You're saying when I came to the Greater Toronto Park Council, there was a statement about the development being too dense for the land use. Well, I think so. A lot of what we're doing is sort of, I call it like trying to correct the sins of the past, you know, in terms of development activity that was permitted and approved without any kind, without sufficient stormwater management regulation. So trying to go back in to the developed landscape where there's cooperative landowners and providing stormwater management or treatment or habitat creation where we can. And so I think contemporary rules are much more protective than say those from prior decades. But the other piece that I'll say is that, given Anne Arundel County's development patterns, we're now at the point where a lot of what's left is oftentimes maybe a little bit more marginal. So it's important to do what Kelly's talking about, which is to be really protective of those resources that are present and to make sure that development that does occur occurs outside of those otherwise protected areas. And I have to agree with her that I think planning and zoning has really gone, very strongly in that direction. And we're working, the land use agencies, I think, are working better together than they have a lot in the past. We're working with inspections and permits a lot as well on the review and development of these projects. So, yeah.
So John next.
Hi, this is John Spencer. Eric, do you have is there a goal of what clean water is, a definition? And then do you do like annual measurements, 5-year measurements, 10-year measurements, whatever, to measure progress and how successful the activities are?
So we've got a couple different ways of measuring success. We have our stormwater permit requires us to provide treatment for a certain amount of impervious surface, like the roads, parking areas, rooftops, basically providing an equivalent treatment of that area, which is really a proxy for these other kind of pollutant load reductions. And so in terms of reductions, and a lot of this, at least initially, just because it's so broad scale, is based on models in terms of reducing sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, which are the drivers of algae blooms and sort of the water clarity issues. So we do keep track of our modeled reductions of those pollutants, and we've got targets that we've got to hit for all of the impaired waterways, and we're still a ways off on most of those targets, but we recognize this is going to be a multi-decade effort. So there are yes. So the county does non-tidal stream monitoring in a number of sites to look at water quality improvements. And then we also work closely with the nonprofit Watershed organizations throughout the county who are doing most of the tidal sampling. We don't have access to the boats or the folks who are out doing the tidal creek sampling, but Arundel Rivers Federation, Magathie River Association, Severn River Keeper. And, we do work closely with them in terms of looking at the water quality improvements that they're either picking up on or not seeing over time. And again, a lot of that is variable year to year based on bigger trends in terms of precipitation and whatnot. But anecdotally, I think we're seeing on a lot of waterways that, especially in terms of aquatic grasses and those sorts of things, we are seeing a return to an abundance condition that many of us, certainly myself, have never seen in our lifetime. If you look at the grasses on the Severn or even the Magathie at this point, they're far more abundant than they were, say, 20 or 30 years ago. As one metric in terms of water quality improvement. But there's a lot going on, not just stormwater programs. There's tremendous upgrades in terms of the county's wastewater treatment plants. And we are working with the community college, for instance, to sample the Road River, where one of our wastewater treatment plant discharges was taken offline a few years back. So that's, I guess I can tell by your facial expression, that's not exactly what you're looking for, but it's there's a lot of moving parts. And so we are, using a variety of different vehicles to measure progress. But of course, at the end of the day, cleaning up our local waterways is really the end goal. Yeah. Well, like I say, we do have these metrics within our permit that we need to attain, and also the total Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load goals that we've got to attain. And so that's one set of metrics. But in terms of taking water quality samples in the Severn River and saying, well, this is directly attributable to the things that we've done, that's a bigger task, I think, in terms of the complications. Yeah. For bacteria, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, right. Right, yeah. Mhm. Sure.
This is Emma Buckman. I was wondering, I saw a lot of the dates that were mentioned for like references to legislation and or other developments were in like the 2007 to like 2010s. And I was just wondering, and this is for anybody, but a lot has changed since then, especially climate change and its effects have become a lot more real and they're being felt much more. So I was just wondering what the comprehensiveness of like the preparedness and if you're going to have to change your plans, if you're going to have to modify the way that you're approaching protecting the environment based on the more recent developments of how climate change is being more acutely felt.
So I think maybe you're referring to Kelly's presentation in terms of a lot of the critical area legislation and that sort of thing. But one of the things I'll say with regards to stormwater management regulations is that MDE starting this summer is basically reconvening folks from local jurisdictions, other stakeholders to reevaluate whether or not the stormwater rules that are in place are protective enough, not so much from a water quality perspective, but from a quantity perspective, looking at, are the storms that we're getting more intense than 20 years ago when these rating curves were developed? Do we need to tighten up the water quantity regulations from development as well? So that is something that's being actively evaluated at the state level. And that's also something that's in the GDP in terms of a goal locally to be able to address those regulations as well.
And our regulations, I mean, mine were starting dates, the dates that I had that were in the 80s. Like I said, we have updated our regulations periodically through that point. We're due for another update, but we are holding off a little bit to include, as I said, some feedback from some of these meetings and different things like that. But those will have, we'll look at planting standards, like I said, that can tolerate sea level rise so that the buffers continue. We're making some changes with the stormwater. So even without the legislation, we're able to make some changes within the program to start looking at those kind of things that will only increase as we go forward.
Okay, thanks. Tom Hampton, Eric. You spoke about Chart Ridge and the issues that they've had there with flooding. And I had the impression that you were saying that basically it was still properly designed and that's the way it was supposed to have worked. However, when I look at it, I'm not a member of that community. I've been watching it for a number of years. When I look at that, I see that certain neighborhood development that occurred maybe 25 years after Chart Ridge really caused that flooding. And that's part of approvals that the county did. And my question really is anybody looking at future problem areas like Chart Ridge to see if you can prevent neighborhoods from having major flooding in their areas?
So again, and Department of Inspections and Permits handles stormwater review for new development. And I will just go back to Chart Ridge. So that facility, and again, this predates any of us, so I'm not pointing fingers, but at one point in time, somebody thought it was a good idea, again, to co-locate essentially open space recreation areas and these stormwater management facilities, which in an ideal world would only be really occupied, every 5 years. They're designed for what's called the 10-year storm, which seems to happen more frequently than every 10 years. But what they often turn out to be, like I say, was sort of swampy, maybe ball fields or other areas that really weren't great for stormwater management and weren't great for recreation either, but we're left with some of those artifacts. So situations like that, there are some accommodations that can be made, and there's been discussions with Chart Ridge. But what I'd say in terms of your question about going forward, there is, yes, a tremendous focus on trying to make sure that new development is not causing downstream issues for existing neighbors, and also that it's not causing issues for the people who are going into those homes that are going to be built as well, because we've seen situations like that where stormwater management isn't handled properly within a community, or lots are developed in areas that were high groundwater table or wetlands, and the people who move into those homes then come to the county and say, how could you let my house be built here? Those kinds of things. So I think there is a lot more attention going to that these days than there has been historically, including making sure that, like I say, those lots don't get sited in those locations. What we're also seeing again, and this is something where I think I personally struggle with, is there are homes that were built in the last 50 or 60 years that probably wouldn't be built now because they're located in flood prone areas. And maybe there was some little amount of flooding that occurred historically. And like you say, as the land use changes, those problems get worse, but in an ideal world, they probably wouldn't be located in those spots anyways. And so one of the things we did a couple of years ago was we created a flood prone property acquisition program, actually, that it was the pilot program. So we've only acquired one property at this point, but it allowed the county the opportunity to buy out essentially lots that had been developed, probably shouldn't have been developed, and then demolish that house essentially and return it back to a natural state. But like I said, the communication lines with planning and zoning and inspections and permits are much more open these days, and we're highly attuned to trying to avoid those circumstances. So it's not perfect, but I think it's better than it has been.
Shayla Powers. I'm not really sure who to credit. So science teacher in the county. So I was just going to say thank you for the step pool behind Annapolis High School. The kids, my group of kiddos, when I taught there, were a part of like helping the prep for that and get all that together. So really awesome program. But I'm just honestly curious when we're talking about educating and going forward, and especially your replant got me thinking about this. What are some of the things that we're going to maybe see coming down the pipeline with the school system? Because I definitely know that my students remember these projects, like even like my environmental science kiddos, who they definitely get excited when we do the project where hypothetically you're going to fix downtown Annapolis and stop it from flooding. And the kids who have been paying attention really get into, like you said, thinking of like, what is a natural thing? Do we move boulders in? I love how the default for a lot of the students is we're just going to raise downtown Annapolis. And I was like, I love that you all think that is something we can do overnight, but that is what their go-to is. But I'm just curious, like, and I think replant from my own childhood growing up, I remember coming home in like second grade. I know the kindergartners do the trip at Downs Park where they sent us home with trees, and we were told our homework was to plant the tree somewhere in our community or in our neighborhood and things like that. So I'm just curious, what are some of the ideas? Because I definitely think the students are gravitating towards it. They get excited about it, helps them take ownership of their community. Like, will we see anything else going forward helping with that?
Yeah, so I think probably talking about it at Annapolis High School is we have a partnership with Arlington Echo, or and COVID obviously threw that whole thing for a loop. Yeah. But on many of our projects, whenever we could really have it available, we would try to bring in the kids from Arlington Echo to have them plant some of our capital improvement projects. And we do also have a significant number of projects that are actually going on school property. So we've got one over at Severn River Middle that'll probably start this summer. There's another project going on behind Annapolis High School this summer. And so when we have that collaboration, I mean, we love to hear from the science teachers, because that's what, this is a living laboratory. We actually have a project that we did at the community college where students in biology class were out there sampling it, as part of their project. And so, but of course that's, dependent upon the buy-in of the teachers there. But anytime there's opportunities for collaboration, we're very interested in doing that. We've got an education and outreach coordinator who can come in and talk to students. We'll do that at private or public schools. And of course, Watershed Stewards Academy does a tremendous amount of outreach along those lines as well. Yeah. Thank you.
So one of the things that one of my main roles at the organization is connect to schools. So recently in our certification course, we just had 2 high school students do it and get internship credit for that. So they attended North County High School. They just graduated a couple weeks ago, but they were able to be engaged that way. So they took our certification course, they installed the project that we do for the class, and then they were able to create their own capstone project and engage their fellow high school students. So they helped out on their native plants garden that the other students were doing, and they also created a rain barrel and native plants campaign for the students to do. So they worked with AP Environmental Science students and the Environmental Club at North County High School, presented to them. So that's just one way we have students be engaged. I go out to schools, give presentations. We have stewards going out giving different talks, different programs. So I think most recently I've been going to Belgrove Elementary School and doing the mindfulness in nature program there. So getting the kids from pre-K, kindergarten, connected to the environment from there, and then slowly building that in to other programs they do. So when they go to Downs Park, they are familiar with some of the stuff. And when they eventually come to Arlington Echo, they already are engaged that way. And that's just some of the ways that we're getting students engaged throughout the county.
Are there any other questions from SAC members?
Yeah, I'm not sure who to ask this. I'm just wondering about the whole sewer versus septic issue. And is it pretty much up to communities to start the ball rolling if they wanted to change over, or does the county have like areas that they're prioritizing on that, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the county does have priority areas, but really at the end of the day, it's driven by community interest. And so, like I say, if there's any interest at all on the part of the community, I would suggest reaching out. You can reach out to me, and our utilities folks can just come give a broad overview. Here's why this is, a good thing to do. Here's what the nuts and bolts are in terms of the process of getting it started. Here's what the cost is, because the cost has really been the stumbling block for a lot of communities historically. But in order to move forward with a petition for sewer service, it needs to be 50% plus one of the community. So if you live in a large community, that could be quite a, politicking effort or whatever to make that happen. But yeah, so like I say, if there's just sort of a curiosity, we're happy to come out and start that conversation, and then we can go from there in terms of what the next steps might be.
All right, and if since that's all the SAC members, if you want to.
Well, Pat had a question. Paul Spadero is here, and he would like to give us some comments about particular reasons.
As we all know, the critical path for solid and sustainable and successful stormwater management is enforcement. And you haven't talked about that tonight. And I know in working on stormwater management for many years, I've met with many of the county enforcement teams who've gone out to do monitoring and checkpointing everything. Could you talk to what you're doing to improve it, because it has been seriously lacking in the past, and that's critical to ensuring all these programs are in place?
So enforcement is the province of the Department of Inspections and Permits, and I think both in terms of sediment and erosion control, which is sort of the usual issue that gets folks hackles up if there's a construction going on and there's silty water leaving the site as a result of poor sediment and erosion control practices. I think that's something that they've started taking quite a bit more seriously and engaging in. And then, like I say, we're working really with inspections and permits on both the review of stormwater management plans for sort of final stormwater management development, and then also looking at projects as they're under construction. If issues arise, trying to work with inspections and permits and the developer to cooperatively come to a solution to address those issues if it's something that needs to go beyond what's on the plan set and that sort of thing. So, there's been significant turnover, I would say, at inspections and permits over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. And I think part of that was in response to, hearing the public outcry about how development was being handled in terms of stormwater management and trying to address those issues. So you know, if issues come up, I certainly would encourage you to reach out to them. You can reach out to me and I'll pass those concerns along as well. But that may be something that could be part of a future presentation as part of the SAC if there's additional questions for IMP.
I'd like to introduce Paul Spadero for some brief remarks. Questions?
Yes, I'd like to talk a little bit tonight, probably about 2 minutes really. And I want to really first thank the county for especially Eric and Kelly Kernitz. As you know, I've been the quote unquote river keeper for the Magathy since the early 1990s, and probably before river keepers were even known in the county, was doing what the president of the Magathy River Association has been doing. And I'd like to take a moment to really state for the record that I had mentioned this to Stuart Pittman, is that we measure your mistakes, the county's mistakes. And tonight I want to really say and focus on that the water quality in the Magathy and the health of the Magathy is declining. We have been monitoring the river for 40 years, as Eric pointed out. We're the ones doing the monitoring in the river, and the county does a fairly good job monitoring the streams that go into the river, but the river is where it collects everything. We have records to verify the river is only getting worse. And as mentioned tonight, the decline is related to overdevelopment and controlling stormwater. And the key point that I want to leave you tonight with is that the effectiveness of these stormwater controls have been oversold. Consider this: if they had been working on the river, the health of the river would be improving. We've always heard that the stormwater, that, you know, it's always the older homes that are causing the problems. Well, they're not building any more older homes. They haven't been building older homes for 20, 30 years. It's the new homes that are causing the problem. Our pollution problems are self-infected. As we drive down Route 2, the damage to our river and environment is not obvious. So consider this: every new home puts 2 more cars in front of you on Route 2. Every new store attracts, like a magnet, additional cars on Route 2. 40 years ago, you drove to Annapolis, only took you 10 minutes. Today, it could take you 40 minutes to an hour. The point is, the damage to our environment, and consider this as you're planning forward, is catastrophic, just like the traffic along Route 2. It's not obvious, but it mounts day to day, year to year. As you plan the future, move forward on open land. Most of the open land that is left in this county are 2 classes, either steep slopes or wetlands. Any development on those lots will require modifications and variances to county code and will cause greater environmental damage than any previous developments. Greater environmental damage than any previous developments. So as you discuss the future development plans for Region 4, consider this: when a lot is cleared of trees, it increases runoff by 66%. A developer is only required to address that 66% to the extent practical, but for who? And the way developers control environmental impacts is to the extent practical is through a series of best management practices. Well, what is a best management practice? A BMP is a choice that planners and developers use to control the impacts of development. They make a list of options and choose the best management practice. But in my opinion, those practices have no data or proof that they actually work. Simply stated, there's a list of practices that do not work, and a best management practice is chosen from the list that doesn't work. So yikes. It is no wonder that the health of the Magathy is declining. To improve our environment, you really need change. Thoughts, prayers, and ignoring consequences will not improve the environment. Finally, consider that all the environmental damage to the Magothy and its watershed comes from our failure to control overdevelopment. We knew this in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and so forth. And remember, I've been doing this since the 90s. If the goal is to preserve a certain level of quality of life in this region, then we must do a better job controlling development and issues relating to stormwater runoff. At some point, we must realize that even the best hotel has to put up the no vacancy sign. Route 2, College Parkway, and Mountain Road is not the land of opportunity for a developer. It is our home. And that's what I want to believe in.
There is one question online, and then if that's okay with you, and after that, we'll go into the breakout sessions.
All right, so a member of the public asked for the environmental hotline number, and just like an example of when you would use it, I guess. So, environmental hotline number.
I'll repeat the question. So I guess the member of the public asked for the environmental hotline number. So there's a couple of different ways to report to the county. 311 is an app that you can use to report environmental violations. If you see a construction site that's spewing mud or something like that, you can do that. Also, the number 410-222-7171 is the county's environmental hotline. So either of those numbers, if you happen to see something that looks amiss, you can report those to inspections and permits, and they'll send an inspector out.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the presentations. So now here we begin the breakout session. We have for the SAC members, remember, please keep in mind that this is for the SAC members. The public is welcome to listen in, but this is mostly for the SAC members to have the discussion as the group and to come up with different ideas and recommendations for the region plan. So that being said, there are 10 SAC members in person. We're going to divide you up into two groups, 5 and 5, and there's going to be a shoreline section and a water quality section. Now we can divide it right down the middle if you guys want, or if you guys have a strong preference of where your passion may lie, kind of work that way. But I'll leave it kind of up to you guys for the next 10 to 15 seconds to kind of decide what you guys want to do, or I can decide for you, whatever you guys want. No, this is a one-time thing. And then after we talk for about 40 minutes within the group, we're going to come back together and we're going to share some ideas. There is a water quality and a shoreline. Yeah, it's pretty equal. So if you guys want to do if these 5 over here and those 5 back there, that'll work. Perfect. And to everyone on the Zoom, we will reconvene at 7:40. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and everyone on Zoom. Thank you for hanging with us. We just concluded the breakout discussions, so now we're going to kind of have a big group discussion. As previously mentioned, there was two groups, one to discuss the shorelines and one to discuss the water quality. Does a representative from either group want to go first? Hey.
Right. This is Emma Buckman, and I am representing the water quality group. Can I? No, I can't. Most of what we went over, we had four major things that we discussed. One was pollution and reducing usage of septic tanks. One was being more robust in policies and educating the public. Another was engaging in case studies and more coordination between different groups and governmental agencies and nonprofits. And the last, you're staring at, I can't.
It's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Yeah. So what Emma was just talking about was we were discussing this group different aspects relating to the education of the public, as well as different aspects of the community, from HOAs, different community organizations, just to have them be aware of different of different aspects as it relates to the water quality and what they can do to kind of help make it a little better. Another thing we discussed, or that was discussed, was coordination with other county agencies, coordination with maybe even different counties, and examining different case studies to really help formulate ideas and plans that can be applicable to Anne Arundel and specifically Region 4. So as we all know, Region 4 is very unique, and there's not really a place like it. But we can pick and look at different case studies and take different aspects and see how they can relate into Region 4. And another thing is too was the conversation around septic and sewer. And we're kind of having different studies and analyses of how to incorporate more of those areas into the region as well. Does anybody else from this group want to say anything? No? All right, then I will give this to Bo.
Okay. So Bo Breeden, just so everybody online. Our topic was on shorelines, and I think everybody realizes we need to create more living shorelines across the county. We live in a county with 530 some miles of shoreline, so it's an imperative thing for whether it's sea level change, climate change, that we make shorelines more being able to restore themselves, being able to react to the larger storms that we're having. Our discussion was a lot on the October 28-29 storm, which was the second highest tidal event in the Bay in recorded history, behind Isabel, and the damage it did, right? So we have a practice here in this county of having allowed hardened shorelines, rocks, and wood jetties and things along those lines. And a lot of people had lost those during that storm. I live in Cape St. Clair, and of about 150 homeowners along River Bay, about a third of those were lost in one storm, where people are doing repairs now, repair work. And we have to work with the Office of Critical, the Critical Areas Office on a regular basis. But in Cape St. Clair, we also just finished up a $1.7 million project in partnership with both our county funding partners, state and federal, of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And we did a variety of different things. And it doesn't all have to be just on the shoreline. It doesn't have to be just all plants. It can be things out in the water, such as oyster reef balls. It can be, we also did uprooted tree wads. But one of the things I think we learned was funding's an issue. Everybody needs more money for these projects, right? It's where do you get this? But regulatory issues that need to change. The county is doing a lot on their end, I know, to improve practices and all. At the same time, the state has a very complicated overlay process on tidal wetland permits, and I think there could be a lot done. The county can recommend to the state on how to better maybe help work on those different things. The expertise I think, those of us here are interested in how the county is going to look 20, 30, 40 years from now. There's a huge industry out there, and connecting communities with the industry and having, the proper educated employees at the county to be able to facilitate that will go a long way to improving the county's resiliency for future projects and all. I think, Kelly's done a great job in improving her department and their focus here more recently. We've worked with Eric's department over the years in coordination with the $298,000 to build the stone jetties and all to build our living shoreline because of a 33-mile fetch out on the bay that you can't just stick plants out there. They'll wash away. But if you put a rock jetty in between them, allow areas to fill in, you get a more restorative area, which will hold up better in these storms as they get bigger and badder over time. But streamlined processes, I think, is a huge thing we're going to have to work on here. And then slowly you can connect the things that are upstream, the things that are downstream, and hopefully improve the bay for generations to come.
Thank you, Bo. So you kind of heard two different aspects of the environment and two different, takes of how these conversations played out. So one thing that the SAC of Region 4 is going to continue to do is have these conversations and have these different exercises at these SAC meetings. So as we move forward, keep that in mind as we go to these different meetings. The next meeting we're going to have is about housing and culture, the cultural resources, and there'll be a nice little breakout activity very similar to this, a little different each month, just so we can keep you guys' interest a little bit better, right? So with that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Ann. And on this, or Michael, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Mike Stringer from Office Planning and Zoning. Just want to comment that these were super productive conversations tonight. I'm really impressed by the amount of passion, local knowledge, and expertise you guys are bringing to this. And I wanted to offer an idea that I think we can take a lot of these ideas that you've put down on the Post-it notes and on the flip charts and come back with some draft kind of statements of what you identified as challenges and opportunities, and initial draft statements of recommendations to include in the plan. Kind of put that onto paper for you guys to start to think about how this plan is going to start coming together. So if that sounds good to folks, we can work on that behind the scenes and then bring that to you later in the process. Okay, I'm seeing hit.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the meeting. Do you have something, Eric?
Yeah, if it's okay with you, Ann, there's one person online that has their hand raised. They want to speak, and we do have some time, so it's up to you.
Oh, sure. Let's do it. We have time.
Hi, Sally. You should be able to speak now.
Yeah, can you hear me now? I'm trying to unmute, but can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. So this is Sally Horner with Magothy River Association. And I just want to say, I really appreciate all the effort that the volunteers have put into this, and the statements from the county this evening. And I guess my particular question, or my concern really for the watershed, for the Magothy River watershed, is the increasing percent of imperviousness that's produced as a result of development. And now that we have, kind of a different maybe model now for moving forward in terms of office space post-COVID, I'm wondering what the county is doing to encourage redevelopment and maybe decreasing the amount of impervious surface at some of these areas where there's lots of imperviousness.
Well, one thing with in regards to redevelopment,
Thank you, Dr. Horner. This is Michael Stringer again from Ops Planning and Zoning. That was a great question. And I think that is one of the fundamentally important land use and planning objectives that this group's going to be thinking through and across the different regions as well. That was certainly a major theme of Plan 2040, the general development plan for the county. And with that, we include a lot of recommendations in that plan to make sure that we're streamlining our regulations. Like we've seen the Glen Burnie overlay that was passed a couple of years ago now by the county council, trying to think through how can we make redevelopment the easier, more efficient thing for developers to do to get that private capital moving in that direction. So we're seeing some regulatory reforms, and I think we're going to try to see more of that in the future as we better understand how to do that, as well as thinking through financial incentives to make sure that those are all going in the right direction as well. The county in the last year has been working on the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, the Parole Town Center Master Plan, and both of those include a number of recommendations on how to try to align all of our county policies to promote redevelopment of those areas. And I think there's going to be lessons learned from those as well that can be taken into these region plans to look at those areas that this group identifies and we see as opportunities for redevelopment, or old commercial strip centers and things like that that are aging, so that we can see those places be redeveloped, come up to contemporary stormwater management standards, and not exacerbate the loss of forest cover. So anyone else want to add anything to that?
Thanks. It's Tom Hampton. My question to you would be, if we're going to try and redevelop for town centers or whatever area we're going to be doing, we're going to be dealing with a lot of different property owners. At least that's what I would expect. And so, I mean, what kind of approach, if you need a property owner to agree to an entirely different view of how they're going to get money out of their property, or how they decide to use their property, does the county have a plan for buying them out and then essentially turning it into the county's vision or our vision?
Hi, Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. In general, when development runs mainly through private sector, the government is involved sometimes, and so it's the market. Now, if you have underutilized, let's say you have a commercial strip center and you have a lot of vacancy and it's underutilized and you're not making the money that you want out of that, you may be looking towards doing something different. There may be the property next door to you that's also underutilized. So a lot of times what happens in redevelopment scenarios is that you'll have a developer that'll come along and they will assemble property to then be able to do a larger project. It is much more complicated development than greenfield development. Greenfield development is super easy. You just design it and you throw it in there. Redevelopment, you already have all your existing utilities, your existing stormwater, if there is any, your existing impervious surface. So assemblages are much more complicated, but they do happen. And there are many recommendations in Plan 2040 that deal with encouraging redevelopment. And I believe that we are currently working on helping the county executive with some legislation right now. And it's not big, comprehensive redevelopment legislation. It's kind of surgical, fixing some of the issues that we have. But I think we're going to see that coming soon. But I think what Dr. Horner brought up is, yes, we do want a lot of these older properties that are underutilized, that don't have environmental protection designed into them. We would like to see them redeveloped, potentially with more density, potentially. It depends on where they are, and with better environmental controls.
And Michael Stringer again, just to add to, we'll be having more discussions about redevelopment with this group in the coming months. So this is a big conversation. You'll get to dive a lot deeper into it in upcoming meetings.
I have met with the MBIA and they made it very clear to me that the developers are not supporting redevelopment. We pushed that in Plan 2040, and we didn't really get very far. It was a topic. It's something that none of us understand why we haven't moved forward until I talked with an officer in MBIA, and they said the developers don't want it. They make more money, and you know that, Christina. And so the public can't push it. It's got to come from the county, and then you got the developers on the other side.
I think if it's done right, the irrational property owner will be incentivized to do it. If I've got a vacant office building that's 50% leased, I don't have an incentive to stay with the status quo. If I could do mixed use, and so I think it's got to be right. If the zoning's going to be identical, it doesn't make sense. Then yes, a property owner's not going to be incentivized. So I'm surprised to hear that part about developers don't want to do redevelopment. I think there are cases where it makes sense. But again, whatever legislation, whatever it is that the county does has to be adequate enough to incentivize the private sector to do the development or to redevelop the property.
I guess having read a fair amount of the prior development plan and having seen some of the things that I thought, wow, that's a great idea that never happened. That's where it seems to me that where you've got great ideas in this plan, somebody needs to make them happen. I don't know who that somebody is. I doubt that I can do it, but how do you really move those kind of things forward, even though they look great on paper? Who really is going to move it forward? Is it a county executive or is it county council?
Christina Pompa again. It's a combination. There are many recommendations in Plan 2040. I can tell you that I think a lot of them would not be supported by the county council if we put things in front of them to move those things forward. So we have to pick and choose what we are going to tackle. Because really, even this plan, and ultimately you all are going to be making recommendations on comprehensive rezoning. All of that has to go through the county council. And they can amend what goes forward to them. With Plan 2040, they amended that plan about 120 times. So it really takes a lot of citizen input to make sure that the plan is not radically changed at county council. But there are also some things that we are not going to tackle right now because we know we can't get it done. So I don't have a good answer for you because all of those recommendations, goals, policies, and strategies in Plan 2040, many of them require legislation or they require plans that have to get adopted, studies that need to get funded. Who creates funding? Who creates the budget? The budget is adopted by the county council. So most of it ends up getting funneled through them.
No, absolutely. And I think that's actually a very serious comment is please stay involved because as we get closer and closer, the weight of your responsibilities becomes heavier and heavier, right? And we need you as the SAC to help us get this region plan through council. And that being said, we can kind of wrap up tonight. Just two quick notes. Next month, meeting will be at Broadneck Library again. The meeting time is at 6:15. Not 6. So someone beat me out for the first 15 minutes of the 6 o'clock hour. And that's the Housing and Cultural Resources. July 25th, the 4th Monday of July. Happy early birthday. And then in August, as we were kind of talking about here, is that will be the mixed use development charrette component for us. And that will be at Severna Park. And we can touch more on that next month as well. So now, with that being said,
So this is Bo Breeden again. Just one thing to bring up. I know we want to educate and reach out, and we're all trying to figure out different ways to do it, community groups and all. I'm on the planning committee for National Night Out, which is the Police Community Relations Council's event. I'm the president of the Eastern District. We're hosting it at Early Heights on August 2nd. It's a free event for families and all. We have 1,500 to 2,000 people. Eastern District is basically Pasadena, Severn Park, Broadneck. It stretches up to Curtis Bay. If this group wants a table, John used to run the committee. I'm the food chair for the last 7 years. I know Amy's participated for years. We have a chance to have a table at an event where if we just have a giveaway from OPZ or the group, and you want these surveys and these QR codes and all that to get in front of 1,500 people at one event. I just wanted to bring that up. I was just here last week for the planning meeting for that. So I want to bring it before everybody. They asked me to, so I can fill out the forms, and I'll get with you, but we'll fill out the forms and to have a table. And the only thing is you have to have a free giveaway basically. And I don't know if that's pencils or pen or a fun game, play tic-tac-toe and you win a zoning card or something like that, right? Right. I mean, whatever it is something fun, but I think, right, we're in a spot zoning. Yeah. Early Heights would like that, I think, if you're following along, but but something along those lines, I think we should participate in the largest event that's held on county property in our region. So if everybody wants, I don't know if you have to vote on that or what that takes, but I just wanted to bring that up because I can send the paperwork out and everything. August 2nd, it's Tuesday. National Night Out is actually an event that's all over the country. Police departments, first emergencies. It is to connect communities with their first responders, in particular, the law enforcement, to create synergies. And it's a free event. There's free food and water, and along with games and all. Not traditionally, the 6 of the 7 years it's happened here in Eastern District, we average 1,500 to 2,000 people. The rest of the county districts average 100 to 200 people. So we have an opportunity to really get in front of a lot of people at an event that OPZ's never probably been to, but health departments there. Many of the other departments are there from the county. So yeah, DPW's there, everybody. So it's an opportunity that you guys, I think however, I'm in charge of the kitchen, so I won't be available to sit at the table, but I want to make sure everybody has, we can get this out. And I think it's just a good way to get in front of people. It's indoor, outdoor. There's some functions, aspects of the kitchen, but the design of it's to be outside. It's rain or shine, basically. If it blows away, like the 1 year tornado rolled through, like you're catching tables and tents, but
I think, send me your information on that, and county staff can at least, we'll get something. So
it's not a political thing on either side.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that we also look for sponsorships. So if there is a community organization or some other kind of organization that you're a member of that would like to donate money for this, it helps a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, pass it to you.
I think, Eric, we can talk about that maybe offline.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, I think this has been a very interesting meeting, very exciting meeting. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, ayes have it.
Thank you all.